Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so happy to have so many of you here today to listen to Dr. Teresa Grossi, who's going to be talking on transition planning. We had her speak last month on the topic, and this is kind of part two of it. Okay, Teresa, it's all yours.
Thanks, Kathy, and it's thanks out to you all for attending, and it's really nice to be back to talk about something that's very dear to my heart and has been my passion over my career. And it's about, preparing for that life after high school and what should be happening during the high school and middle school years, and how do we do that as a shared responsibility. And I think I'll share some examples throughout to show that this is more than just a school responsibility, but how do you really promote interagency collaboration and identify what else could be happening within your community and then maybe throughout the state. So with that, let's start with just a little bit of what we hope to accomplish. This time, I'm going to spend a little bit more time in the transition elements of the requirements through the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and understand how we move from what we all know as that IEP to a transition IEP, and how that is about planning and preparing for that life after high school. And I'm going to do some highlights around those best practices. So just a little recap for those who were with us last month. We looked a little bit about that lifespan approach to transition, of that we just can't start this in high school or at 14 when it's required, that we really need to think about what happens from early childhood to K-12 in that kindergarten to first grade, the intermediate school age, and then middle and high, and then what really goes on after high school. We spent a little time talking about a unified framework of transition services, and that we don't supplant what is already going on in those high schools, we supplement them. So our first question is, what is happening around career development? What is happening around career technology, career tech? How are we preparing to go on to college? So all those questions we would ask, and that's happening for all other kids. Then what do we need to happen to supplement what is happening? And in some cases we don't, and in other cases we do. We just don't want to keep pushing that dual system. So more of a unified or inclusive approach to transition services. We spend a little time talking about the trajectory of a good life for your loved one or for that young adult. And that purpose of transition planning is to be able to get to that good life, and what needs to happen in high school to be able to project after high school and then beyond. And we also spent a little bit of time on more of our time around those post-school environment and those requirements. So when that student leaves the high school setting, they go on to college, and IDEA is no longer available. It's the Rehabilitation Act and the 504 of the Access. We also talked about how do you make that good job match, about careers, and how do you prepare someone for community life, not just about where someone lives, but being a part of their community and belonging in their community. So we did a little bit of a what do we need, what's going to happen, after we leave, what's that big end, and now we're going to go back and say, well, how do we use transition services to help prepare? I just love this definition only for one reason, is that we've had this definition for since it was defined, I don't know how long ago, 15 years ago, but it's a coordinated set of activities. And that coordinated set of activities means that it's about coordinating with the schools and higher ed, and also maybe the providers or whatever else needs to happen within gen ed, career tech. How do we look at these activities designed within a results oriented process? So again, we're looking for outcomes. When that student leaves, what's happened? Are they attending college or aren't they? Are they involved in employment or aren't they? What are they doing within their community? Hopefully in that participation. So all of those post-school activities relate to each of these areas that are defined right here. So let's just talk for a moment about the IDEA's requirements of transition. And in Indiana, we have named it the Transition IEP, so that people don't think it's something separate, like a transition plan that's separate beyond everything else that should be going on in the IEP. So it is a flow through it. But the requirements is that what's been adding is that onto that IEP is that now from the age of 14 we need to start adding some transition assessments both, and so I'll talk a moment about that, and including authentic assessments. And we looked at what do we need to do now to reach that post-secondary goals. So each student will have a post-secondary goal of education training, so college, technical schools, apprentice programs, on-the-job training for some students, employment. Is it competitive? Is it integrated? And for some students, not all students, if it's appropriate, an independent living goal. And why it's appropriate is that not all students need that extra support beyond what is typical for that developmental stage of that individual. You know, for if you live on a college campus or spend a lot of time on a college campus like we do, I could tell you that probably 95% of the freshmen need an independent living goal, whether it be social skills, whether it be money management, time management, organizational skills. What this appropriateness is about those individuals who really need that extra support. And if they didn't have it, they're beyond their parents, they're going to really have some difficulty. So those daily living skills, those social interaction skills. The other requirement, IDEA requires transition to begin at the age of 16. It has gone back and forth over the years, but Indiana decided in the last round of the reauthorization to keep it at 14, that there must be some components in that IEP that really focus on developing those transition services. So that's really exciting. So for some students that may be still in middle school, but a lot of times that's around that 8th grade freshman year in high school. That students have to be invited to the Transition IEP meeting. Now, students must be invited, that's what the law says. It doesn't mean they have to attend. What best practice says is that we want students not only invited and attending, we want them leading their IEP meeting. That's what self-determination is about, learning more and more about your IEP and your goals. It is their plan, it is their IEP. We need their voice in these meetings. The other piece is about the 1 year before a student reaches the age of majority, which is 18 in Indiana, that we have to inform family members that at that age of 18, students become their own legal guardian. I don't want to go into guardianship. What has been a big movement across Indiana and nationally, but is about supported decision making and helping students make that decision. For some students, guardianship is probably needed primarily around medical and financial. And so that is called a partial guardianship. But the supported decision making is really important to help students still be involved in their community and having the right to vote and make some of these decisions. So, but parents need to know at least 1 year before. I could spend a whole hour just on talking about guardianship. So I'm going to give a little example of a short video of the Indiana Secondary Transition Resource Center here at IIDC, the Indiana Institute on Disability and Community. And we did, several years ago, so this is a little older, we did some videos on successes to show how transition in action, what could happen. And so when we look at this, the question will be not only that the student is fairly successful and she's beyond college now, but what had to happen in those school years to get her to this point. So let's take a moment and watch this video.
From a very early age that I was going to be going to college. Even after I was diagnosed with autism when I was 4, they continued to kind of ingrain into my mind that I was going to go to college. People were telling my parents, you know you're going to regret this later, she's not going to do it.
Yes.
Took the regular Core 40 curriculum that's a standard here in Indiana. Just the accountability that I had to have in all my classes, my teachers telling me to advocate for myself, and my experiences outside the classroom that I feel helped me prepare the most, because it wasn't so much the knowledge that was standing in my way, it was the communication ability and the life experience and stuff like that. I was dead set on Indianapolis because it had a resource center, like an entire building for services for people with disabilities, and I figured I may need that, but where I go now is nearby. My mother had to drag me over here, set one foot on the campus, and I was immediately in love with it. Really, the biggest difference is that this campus was a little smaller and it did not have a resource center, which that's kind of the reason why I chose this. It would be more of a challenge, and I've always been drawn to that. And I was accepted on Halloween before my senior year. I was in my Marsha Brady costume when I got the call. I'm taking 14 credit hours, but 2 of which are choir, so really there's 12 for academic classes, and I treat college like a full-time job because in a way it is. Even though I know I'm going to graduate, I still don't see that as a reason to not try hard. And every Monday I meet with my sorority. I'm in Zeta Tau Alpha, and on Wednesdays I meet with Student Congress. In April I was elected as an at-large representative, and most recently I've been in the progress of starting my own group, the Autism Youth Ambassadors, with a team of 14 other students, and my academic advisor, who also serves as our faculty advisor. Even though it can be stressful at times, it helps me stay focused and helps me prioritize better, and seeing all my sorority sisters and my friends who are involved, it's inspired me because I want to get more involved and do more now. Well, my parents definitely helped me, and they helped me more with like the adjustment to things aside from job and grad school, like moving into an apartment eventually and being able to get around, things like that. They helped me with because my parents do have more life experience, and they've been extremely helpful, and they've been supportive in everything that I do. But they do help me somewhat with career and grad school, but really my academic advisor, Dr. Bromley, helps me know what my options are. And there are a bunch of programs throughout the school year for seniors that are set up to make the transition easier. And then I also really wanted to be a writer, which I still do write every single day, and no matter what path I ultimately choose, one of my goals is definitely to get a novel or something published. I've been writing since I was 13, and because one of my teachers actually a safer outlet for my anxiety. Like, I used to bang my head against desks, chairs, anything nearby that was hard. I didn't like how it felt. I just didn't know any other way, and I was very impulsive at the time. An English teacher in 8th grade saw I was good at writing, and she told me to go into the hallway for a minute, write about how I felt, and after that I began writing little books and stapling them together, making covers, and my friends would read them. Don't wait until you graduate to start looking, especially if the dream is to go to college. Being an early bird really helps, and knowing your options. We'll likely have a couple resources on college transition for all students, so take advantage of those. Keep an open mind about what you can do, but if you really do want to go to college, don't put that out of the question. Even if people say that you won't be able to make it, you can make it. You just need to work at it. You have to put your trust in yourself, because you know what you're capable of doing, and you have to find a way to communicate that to other people. When you achieve it, they'll see just how strong of a person you are. Being accepted into college was probably the proudest moment of my life.
So, can everyone hear me okay? So a couple things. Natalie is working and still advocating. That was Franklin College, and when she talks about resource centers, she really is talking about colleges and universities that have the Office of Disability Services. When we first released this video, I was doing a training with a group of teachers, and I showed the video. We were talking about the transition IEP, and I showed the video, and I happened to, I always glance to look at the audience for their reaction, and I saw a teacher with just tears coming down her eyes, and then another teacher that her eyes were all watery. And it occurred to me, they were her teachers. And, the one teacher said, we're just so glad to see what happened to her. We don't always get to know what happens to our students after they leave high school. And then they began to share that as middle school years, that it was extremely difficult, that they spent a lot of time keeping her safe because she really could do a lot of head banging. So it was a general ed teacher who finally, at one time in her anxiety, said, just go ahead and go out in that hallway, and that began it. So that was really good. And so I think I answered it. It is Franklin College, but there are many other colleges that I could share across the state of Indiana and elsewhere that are serving individuals. So here's that success. Last time we talked about, we talked a little bit about that post-school outcomes and that colleges that won. So pieces of this is that a local school district can invite, this is a requirement, a participating agency that is likely to be responsible for providing or paying for transition services. So for instance, the example of the driver's license, if the school offers it, then they won't. But so that could be a time where they may ask vocational rehabilitation, or the families may say, we want help with it. And they may reach out to, again, as I said, Crossroads Rehabilitation Center in Indianapolis, or the independent living centers that may offer it. And they may be providing that service, or that they may be paying for that service. Vocational rehabilitation right now is paying for pre-employment transition services. So that is where, if someone is providing or paying for the service, they must invite the person. They can't just say, well, we're going to have vocational rehabilitation pay for this. They have to have that representative or that agreement ahead of time. The other requirements, of course, are the course of study, the graduation requirements, and other kind of services. So I'm going to try one more of these, another example of successes and employment.
For him to be able to get plugged into a job that he absolutely loves, and he's got somebody that will show him, exactly how to do it, and it means everything. I know it is for him. He's just blossomed. He hit junior high, and he was having a really hard time trying to write sentences and be able to read and comprehend, and the math was just out the window, and so that's where we figured out that he was going to not graduate with a diploma but with a certificate. He did 2 years of high school, and then from there he was transferred out to Area 30. He did like high school because he's very social. So he liked it, and they also let him lift weights in the weight class in the morning and in the afternoon, and he was working around in the school, like helping in the cafeteria and that type of thing.
I've had some help to let me know what a job would be like, and what the real world situation would be. I had a teacher who helped me to where I did the same type of job, even though it was like a school, but he helped me out to make sure what a job would be like. I have a job coach. She works at Sycamore Service. She made sure that I get the job that when I need and what I want, and to go ahead and keep continuing my job and help me out to know what to do and what I should be doing correctly, so I won't get into trouble. I come at my job starts at 9 and it ends at 1 o'clock. I think I like cleaning up the place and making it look nice and keep continuing it. What I like working out here is, actually carrying the heavy bags and stuff. It's pretty fun stuff. But, my parents take me to work and I, pack myself food in my lunchbox and I come out and I find something to do and work on my job.
Basically, Dallas is in charge of all the flower beds, de-weeding, any trash, some watering. We've even got into probably some fertilizing and different things of a lot of the flower beds around the clubhouse, out on the golf course. And honestly, every hole has 1 or 2 different flower beds on it throughout the property. We've got about 220 acres, so there's a lot of ground to cover. You have a smaller crew to begin with to cover the 200 and some acres, and to not have to worry about some of the little things up here creates a lot more freedom, so it's a huge help.
I enjoy doing the conditioning, the physical work, and just not really doing anything or sitting around or anything. I don't like that stuff.
Dallas works out at Planet Fitness in Plainfield. He just bought a huge weightlifting apparatus. So yeah, and he built it himself. He was so proud of that part, which was neat for me as a mom. I feel like Dallas is successful because of the support systems that are in place for him with Sycamore. So it's nice to know that there's services that are available, and it gives you peace of mind as a parent that somebody else is helping you with getting this job done.
So, a couple things on the, Dallas's, the difference of someone going on to college and then someone who's going to go right into the workforce or start with maybe community life. What you saw in the example of Dallas was a true shared responsibility. Vocational rehabilitation was involved, who paid Sycamore Services to go in and start working with him during those high school years, start looking for that job. If you heard him talk about getting ready for work the day before, making his lunch and all of that, those are perfect post-school outcome goals of independent living. His obviously post-school goal of employment was a competitive job, and his education was most likely on the job training. So Dallas was that perfect example of that transition part of that IEP. But there's more to it than just that. It is these other pieces that make it so important. So what I like to think about is this process is, that present level, what do we already know about this individual, that present level that's on all IEPs? And that's where a lot of the data is. Where are they performing against the standards, and what are their reading levels, what's their math levels, social level, what are some of the successes and those barriers. And then when we talk about that age-appropriate transition assessment, it's like, what do we need to know? What else do we need to know about the student to help them develop those post-secondary goals? So transition assessments in the beginning start sometimes with, paper and pencil little interest inventories and other kind of aptitude kind of tests, but then they really should be moving to authentic assessments. What is happening in that real setting? So you as a parent, when you're out there with your child and you see them in the grocery store, you see them in a sporting event or a recreation setting, what are those things that could help inform those post-secondary goals? What do they like and don't like? What works and what doesn't work? What are the non-negotiables? So how does it inform what the student's going to do after high school? And so again, the middle school student who says he's going to be the NFL player, and I say, okay, so what do we need to do to get there? And we ask those questions. Are you on the football team? Are you, what are you going to do to be able to get on that team? Again, my job as a professional is not to tell you what you can't do. It's about giving you the information and experiences to make that informed choice. So as we're developing those, and again, when you're in middle school, freshman, sophomore, they're very, very broad. With the help that every year we get closer, most seniors don't know exactly what they want to do, and we know that the average freshman in college changes their major more than once, I think 40-some%. So it's okay that we're going to change it, but we're helping the student to know what they like and don't like, what they want to avoid. So again, I may say I want to, my freshman year, I want a job in the sporting world, and by, senior year, it may be very different. I may end up wanting a job working in a manufacturing plant. I'm just making that up. But again, that's okay. Those annual goals, which you're already used to, are for the life of the IEP, that 1 year. And what are we doing to work on this year to help students meet that post-secondary goal? So it may be organization skills, it may be time management, it may be reading strategies, it may be math strategies, it may be social behavior, emotional kind of skills to help the student. Because regardless, we know whether they go on to college or go right into the workforce, a lot of those skills are needed in all those settings. And then finally is those transition services and activities. What can we do to help the student make informed decisions based upon what they do? And that's where that could be in a transition activity, could be exploring, having to do some research in a specific field. It could be, I really want to be the astronaut. Well, okay, let's see what it takes to be the astronaut. And that's okay. And so after doing that research, I may still want to be an astronaut, or maybe I don't. There could be some specific services as they get older, so you may want to say that's where the vocational rehabilitation, pre-employment transition services that you have. It may be doing a job shadowing. It could be work study. It could be doing just a job, going 1 day on a job site or to a college visit to find out what's happening. So it's that circle ongoing every year until that student leaves high school. What do we know? What else do we need to know to help make help the student make an informed decision on their post-secondary goal? So we know we're going to constantly adjust, we're going to change, we're going to be shifting. What the student does after they leave high school, the schools have no control over, but helping them move towards those activities and those skills and building those goals is what it's all about. And again, it's okay to modify, shift, adjust. That's what transitions are about. So I just want to highlight here, and I want to give some time for some questions and conversation, is some quality transition practices. And the couple I want to just highlight regardless of the student and their level of ability and skill sets, is really very student-focused planning. We sometimes like to think about it as person-centered planning, but making sure the student is in the driver's seat. And the younger the student has that self-awareness and can be really focused on understanding their IEP and what works and doesn't work for them, is very, very valuable. I'll talk about it more in self-determination, but keeping the student at that focus, not fitting the student into what's available, deciding on what is the student going to need, that individualization. The research is really clear about the partnership with families and the involvement, because we know families can't do it alone. I think you heard in Dallas's video, the mother said, release. What a relief to know that I'm not in this alone, and it's just not me in the school, but that the others stepped in, and I can now see that bigger picture. So more that we partner, and that it is that shared responsibility. I can't emphasize this enough. I would spend an hour on self-determination and self-advocacy. It is a predictor of post-school success. That problem-solving, the decision-making, choice-making, advocating for yourself, understanding that self-awareness is so critical. And the more students understand the environments that work for them, the accommodations they're going to need, the more likely they're going to be successful afterwards. When they enter that college world and that world of work, they're going to have to advocate for themselves. They're going to have to they should be advocating with their general ed teachers, or their teachers and principals in the classroom as that practice base. The schools are the safety nets for this. Really understanding, Natalie didn't want the resource center, but she was a strong self-advocate very early on, and that's what helped her. I can go on and tell you the number of times that I know I've had a student in college that had a disability but never self-disclosed, and there's nothing I could do about it. We don't modify, we don't adjust, but it's up to them to make that point. Again, we know about inclusive settings and inclusive classrooms. That's no different than in employment. We know that another true predictor of post-school outcomes is that students have some type of work experience, preferably paid work experience, before they leave school. So like every other teenager, having those part-time jobs, or if you're working with the school and having some of those work experiences while in high school, it really will help that success afterward. So being able to be exposed to the different jobs, and I think, and I'm not sure if I shared with you all, but I could say one of my successes as a transition coordinator is when I spent 2 years with a student, and I probably had 6 different experiences for them, most of them paid, some were unpaid. And when we got close to graduation, all he could tell me was what he didn't want to do. And that's okay, because that's what you have to cross off and say, okay, you didn't want to do it, but what worked in those settings and what didn't work? We have to remember that environmental piece as well. And then I think, no surprise to you all, those social skills training and competency. And then finally, that need to say that we can't do it alone, and to understanding what can we do as a family, and then when do we need that outside help. And interagency collaboration is real important for schools. It becomes a challenge as a family member to navigate the different agencies and understand the eligibility requirements, because if you remember last month we talked about leaving a system based on entitlement. We're entitled to the free and appropriate public education, to the system based on eligibility. So that's going to be really important. And then from a school standpoint, being able to make those linkages with the businesses. So I'm going to take a deep breath. There's a lot here. I know that. All of these are real quality best practices, and many of them are evidence-based practices to predict some post-school successes.